Well, welcome everyone. My guest today is Dr. Emily Kiberd. She's a chiropractor, a mom, and the founder of Thyroid Strong. Dr. Kiberd helps women with Hashimoto's learn how to work out without burning out. She's been featured in Vogue, Elle, and Women's Health magazine. First of all, thank you for the short bio. It's so hard to read like a 5-paragraph bio. We'll figure out you're brilliant in a minute anyways. So you were telling me before, you're a chiropractic physician. How did you get interested in that field to begin with? And then we'll get more into your recent story.
Yeah, I've been a chiropractor since 2007. One of our best family friends was a chiropractor, and my dad is a roofer. He's 72. He's been a roofer since he was 19. To this day, he still gets up on the roof. And he saw a chiropractor when I was a kid, and just going through different injuries, sports injuries, sprained ankles, seeing how the body compensates with old injuries was always just really interesting. Just kind of things working its way up and down the kinetic chain. So then I was like, all right, let's do this. Going to chiropractic school in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we did talk about that, I think,
Yeah.
a long time ago. Awesome.
Yeah.
So then you became a first-time mom some years back and developed some chronic illness.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I had my son in 2015, and kind of all the new mom symptoms where people are like, oh yeah, you're a new mom. I was like, okay, I guess this is normal. First time moms, you don't really know, but extreme fatigue, hair loss. I used to wear a scarf around my neck, like all hours of the day. I just felt like cold. It'd be like 80 degrees out and humid in New York, and I'd wear a scarf. And then, difficulty losing weight. And 18 months postpartum, I was like, this cannot be new mom symptoms. Like, my child is 1.5 years old. And so I started to kind of go down the primary care, endocrinologist, saw a couple different functional medicine doctors. And it was interesting. The first doctors I came across just checked a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And it wasn't until, and I was going through different protocols. And then I met Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and she was, did a barrage of blood work. And she's like, you have an autoimmune condition. And we're really lucky. We caught it early. And let's start to break out some potential contributing root causes. So cleaned up my diet. When I was pregnant, it was like coffee, croissant, go to work. I had fried chicken at night. I just had these carb cravings. And so cleaned up my diet and was on different protocols. And part of that protocol was a mycotoxin test, which came back positive. And so it's like, okay, where do we start to search? So we did a mold test in my office and in my home. And in my home came back with Stachybotrys, black mold, and which there is no visible black mold, but Stachybotrys is it's like heavy and sticky. So if it comes up in an air sample test, it probably means it's been around for a while. And Aspergillus. And so remediated my apartment twice. And in the end, there were leaks around the windows that the building and 4 different contractors just couldn't find. So we sold the apartment and moved. And, part of it was, my son also had, you did a mycotoxin test on my son, and they don't really, from my understanding, have child 5-year-old, 4-year-old normal values. It's just elevated
values. That's true. Yeah.
So it's elevated in adult values for a 4-year-old. Just many different protocols. And from when I met Dr. Gabrielle Lyon to when I actually started to feel better was in terms of energy, was probably about 9 months. And probably a year after meeting, just doing routine blood work every 6 months, Hashimoto's has been in remission. So
amazing. Awesome.
yeah. And even through a second pregnancy, right? Because pregnancy is such a stressor on the body, but I went into it just better prepared in how I was eating and how I was training. That, the second pregnancy, my thyroid values were still optimal.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had those two tests so close. I'm pretty similar. I found out I had Hashimoto's and then found out I had mold a few months later.
Yeah.
So it sounds like to some extent, at least for your career, you focus more on the thyroid piece of it. Where I focus more on the mold piece of it. So were you taking a thyroid replacement? You said you changed your diet. What were you doing for detox and thyroid in particular?
She put me on a Cytomel for about, I think it was 4 to 6 months, really low dose. And for detoxification, it was binders. And I mean, there was different protocols, but the mold specific one was cholestyramine, different supplements, and then a charcoal and bentonite clay also as a binder, and then a sauna, jumping in a sauna 3 times a week.
Good.
And in New York, when I was doing a protocol then, it was going to like a higher dose, which is a kind of infrared sauna that you can do like an hour. And now I have a Therasage.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's something about like not heating up your head that
I agree. Yeah, I have a little tube sauna too, and I prefer it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, super interesting. So you were pretty athletic. First of all, you've had a busy 5 or 6 years. You became a mom. You weren't feeling great. You had your practice. You found out all this. Then it was COVID, and you're like remediating your place, not successfully. Now you've moved to Colorado. I think that you said it's kind of is a combination of COVID and what you've gone through with mold.
Yeah. So, we shut down in March, and come May, June, I was like, all right, rent is not going to pay itself. So I opened back up, and normally, I had a team of 8, and we would be seeing probably like 100 patients a week. And it was chiropractor, trainer, massage therapist, acupuncturist, really like an integrative approach. And so I went back to work and offered like just me in the office, and probably at that time, like 10 people a week, maybe 15 were coming.
Wow, yeah, people are afraid to go out.
Yeah. And then, so I closed my office in June. I was like, the landlords were not really, they were offering deferment, but they weren't offering relief necessarily. And it was actually, I closed like a year ago, a couple of days ago. It was like, a year ago, I was like crying and teary-eyed and moving a whole office into a storage unit and telling my staff we're not coming back. But I think, looking a year ahead to now is like, August, I think I read in the New York Times, like August of last year, Midtown New York foot traffic was down 96%.
Oh, wow.
So just like there was just there's no way. So, so now we live in Colorado. The kids play in the backyard every day instead of like the rooftop that's like that was a block away from a Superfund site in New York.
Oh gosh.
Like
complicating factors for your mom.
Yeah.
Wow.
And and it's very different. Like I think energetically, I like to run on the pace of the environment, but I also know at 40 years old that I can't, I don't work that way. Like I don't do 12-hour days anymore.
Yeah.
5 days a week.
Yeah, we have a similar, story in that too. I sold my practice and moved far away, and we were talking earlier. It's not necessarily like you move and everything's just peachy with housing or with your health or with like being in a new place that you weren't expecting to be in.
Yeah.
But I do think it, it keeps getting better and better. It's just sometimes slower than you'd like it to be, so to speak.
Yeah, especially with COVID, it's not like people are like, hey, let's meet up. Everyone's like, okay, like I feel like just now is it starting to kind of roll around a little bit. Like people are coming out of the woodworks. And on those days where I'm like, oh my God, what do we do? My husband's like, what a fun adventure. Like he's very a ray of sunshine. So, and urban wellness was always my baby before my other babies. Kind of like, I don't like to admit that, but now I get to focus on my other babies, like my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old. So
yeah, it's really awesome. Yeah, sometimes life like takes you off that hamster wheel that you were kind of enjoying, you were enjoying being busy and seeing lots of clients, but sometimes it's for the best that you take, and adding the factor of becoming a mom and a business owner, that's something I went through too. It's like your body is sometimes like, we're not doing all this. We're not up for all this. So the body will give you a sign that it's time to make some changes. Okay. So we've had you on before to talk about working out with, mostly I think we talk about hypothyroidism and how to work out. It's been super interesting. Maybe you can kind of recap for people that, and we can tie it into maybe if you have other chronic illness or you're dealing with mold, how this kind of advice could compare.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people functional medicine doctors included, when they talk about exercise for the autoimmune or the hypothyroid client, they're talking about take it easy, listen to your body, walk, yoga, Pilates, low impact. And I've done all those, I've tried those, and I always felt really low energy. And I think it's important for women with the autoimmune condition or hypothyroid to stimulate the muscle tissue. The muscle is what's going to stabilize our joints. It is a place to dump excess glucose. It's, related to longevity, neuroprotective. And while I really, really wish we could stimulate the muscle by simply taking a walk, it's really important to do it under load, which means pick up something heavy with amazing form, put it down, and do it again. And the research shows that to stimulate the muscle, you just have to reach a point of perceived exertion. So on a scale of 0 to 10, you want to hit about an 8, 7, 8. 10 being like, I can't pull another rep. So you could either do that with fewer reps, heavier weight, or you could do like a 2-pound weight and be doing like hundreds of reps. So I always choose the heavier weight, less reps for time efficiency, and so that I don't give myself an overuse injury. And when we are hypothyroid, it's harder to maintain our muscle tissue.
Okay.
Compared to, the average woman. And so we, our kind of baseline of working out is just for maintenance, not even necessarily growth. And there's only one study in terms of does exercise affect thyroid levels. It's a very small study. It's like 24 men, unfortunately, in India, and they had them take a walk, and then they checked their serum thyroid levels afterwards, and there was a lowering of TSH. Obviously, it'd be more interesting to study women, to study, walking versus strength training. But, there's thyroid receptors in every single cell of the body, including the muscle tissue. So you could affect your thyroid hormone turnover by stimulating your muscle tissue through strength training. And then the last piece that I notice is, and there's no research on this, this is more kind of a clinical observation, seeing a lot of women in my office, is this element of like hypermobility, tissue laxity, joints not being stable. I always check, there's something called a Baton score that physical therapists will use to check hypermobility in certain joints, so like knees, elbows, thumb. And if certain number of points come up, then there's an element of hypermobility. Usually it's associated with like an Ehlers-Danlos, but I have found it in my women with autoimmune conditions. There's no research on it. It's more of like a clinical observation. So the best way to create integrity in those joints, to create stabilization, is not yoga or massage or stretching, even though that's like, we feel like we need that, like we feel tight and stiff. But if you correct those energy leaks where there's not enough stability, those areas of tightness will start to dissipate.
Interesting. So it's kind of opposite what a lot of people would assume.
Yeah.
Walking and yoga and okay.
So, you know, I found, so if you think of like knees hyperextending, working its way up the kinetic chain, like that pelvis will kind of dump forward and there'll be a sway, like almost too much curve in the low back. And then to compensate, the mid back will get really tight.
That's me, all those things. And then the neck out, yeah, I do that too.
Right. So, you know, going back to that original interest of like how the body compensates for something down below up the kinetic chain, you know, that's what I would see with hypermobility. And like no amount of stretching is going to get those knees out of hyperextension. Some deadlifts will.
Yeah.
Creating integrity in the hamstrings and teaching someone how to use their glutes and their core will. But no amount of pigeon or down dog is going to help create that integrity. So, you know, I found it really important to add strength in, and it's a fine line, right? Like you don't want to push someone into a flare up or make them too fatigued, but you also want to challenge them to that point of a perceived exertion of a 7 or 8 out of 10. As that relates to mold exposure and mycotoxin exposure, obviously there is like a whole nother element of fatigue going on there. And so I think it's important to do a couple things. Moves that are very functional. So like not necessarily bicep curls or tricep dips, but some sort of hinge like a deadlift, a squat, a push, a pull, some sort of lunge, some sort of carry. And then the last one would be some sort of anti-rotation. So focusing on functional movements, big muscles, especially after we have mold exposure, it's like we have very limited energy reserve. So minds will use it efficiently. The second thing would be, you don't have to do a bunch of reps. You know, when the trainer's like 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 15, whatever it is. What if it was 3 reps, but a heavier weight, and you just had really good form, you executed 3 times, and then instead of rushing off to the next exercise, you took a nice long break. So professional lifters, Olympic lifters, power lifters, they do heavier weight, they don't do a lot of reps, and then they take up to like a 5-minute break between sets. Versus, you know, a boutique fitness class where you go 50 minutes and then you get your break. So
yeah.
What if it was low reps and then you took a break for like a minute and a half? Like if you've never done that kind of rest break before going back to another round of lifting, it feels very awkward. You're like, like, you know, you walk it out, you shake it out after building tension, and then you return and you do 4 reps. So I think, you know, especially after getting exposure to mold, you have less fatigue, you have that brain fog. Sometimes there's a lot of anxiety and depression as well with mold exposure. It's nice to kind of get out of the head and kind of feel in the body, okay, what is good form? What is a breath? Where should it go? how should I brace my core and then pull the weight. And I don't have to think about, okay, can I push through to 12 reps? It's, can I do 3 reps with amazing form? So that when I was going through, and I've gone through multiple rounds of mold protocols after different exposures, that was my focus because my mind was so foggy, and I used to get really a lot of anxiety around not being able to think really clear and crisp.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, how can I get out of my head and like get into my body, but not for an extended period of time where I am totally exhausted. So I think strength training in that way has been a really powerful tool, in addition to binders and different supplement protocols.
Awesome. That's all super helpful. I want to kind of recap some of the benefits, but yeah, I feel like this is why I had you on it. I feel like my audience, you know, exercise is so important. It's not my specialty per se. I can kind of share what I do and what I've learned, but I think a lot of people, at least I see in my audience, are really looking at diet and supplements, and they're not really looking at different options for movement. And maybe they're feeling like, well, I'm walking and that's enough, or yeah, like they're just sort of doing the same thing they've always done. They don't know how to use weights. They never have. So they're not familiar. And yeah, I've seen, even before I worked with mold, just clients not reaching their goals for what they want their body to look like and feel like, because they're sort of doing the same old exercise they always have, and they don't really know what else to do. It does have to be customized. Like, what if you do have Hashimoto's, or what if you do have mold? Or we just had Deborah on to talk about, you know, menopause. It's like stuff changes, your body changes. I don't think many people would think about only doing 3 reps of a thing. Like, that's pretty awesome. So you said it can lower TSH, which if people don't know, that's generally a good thing. TSH can get too high when it's stimulating the thyroid to work. You said, I'm trying to some of the other benefits you said to the muscle tissue. Oh, glucose control. What else did you say?
Just stabilization of hypermobile joints.
Okay.
And the other, I would say the other important factor is, with hypothyroid, we have slower tendon turnover. And what does that mean? It means all of our tissue is replenishing and regenerating at a certain rate. But when we are hypothyroid, it happens slower. So I'm sure you've seen patients where they come in and they're like they feel like they pulled their shoulder, and then like a month later, they feel like they have a sprained ankle or knee pain or wrist pain, but there's no clear mechanism of injury. Like, they didn't fall, they didn't sprain their ankle, but you're like, pain that's kind of moving around the body. Is always like, when I hear that, I'm always kind of like, okay, that is like something to note. Or like just random sprains that come up. And there's slower tendon turnover, so it takes longer to recover. And it's usually, you know, the Hashi's women are like shoulders and knees, right? They don't usually complain about a lot of neck pain necessarily. It's always kind of the tendons that cross a joint have slower tendon turnover. Frozen shoulder is a really common injury.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So anytime I see a woman with a frozen shoulder, I'm like, okay, when's the last time you got your thyroid checked? And some women are like, you know, what are you talking about? And frozen shoulder, it's contracture. Like, let's say this is your arm bone and this is the shoulder socket. There's ligaments, there's a capsule there, and there's like capsular contracture. And it can take up to sometimes a year to rehab a frozen shoulder, you know, going like 2 to 3 times a week to PT. And I found that really the best is really prevention of it through strength training, through, you know, greasing the groove of the shoulder through a good pressing program and carrying and just knowing how to activate the shoulder, as well as really good breathing patterns. I think as women, sometimes we're trained to suck the belly to the spine and skinny up and make a little waist and breathe really short and shallow. But ideally, we would breathe down and wide into our belly. There'd be an expansion on the inhale and a softening on the exhale. Kind of like when you see babies breathe, like you never see a baby suck their belly in. You never see a baby pull their shoulder blades together, you know, and sometimes that's really common recommendations in terms of how do you engage your core. You know, a lot of women are told to like pull the belly towards the spine. And how do you improve posture? A lot of women are told to pull their shoulder blades and pinch them together all day. But neurodevelopmentally, that's not how we learned how to get upright from crawling or from being on the floor. So a lot of Thyroid Strong is built from how we learned our movements as babies, because that's what I studied. There's a school in Prague called, a school in the Czech Republic in Prague called the Prague School. Okay. And just world-renowned physical therapists looked at how babies learn their movement patterns and, you know, what was the, what had to happen. And what they found was, you know, 3 to 6 months, babies learn to lift their knees up to 90 and stabilize their core properly. Not by sucking in, they have like a little big Buddha belly and they learn to brace, you know, and then at 4.5 months we roll. So these milestones were hit, you know, with stress and with cultural things of what we told to like suck our belly in. Ideally, those movement patterns would happen on a subconscious level, but sometimes like our body forgets and needs to get retrained. So, so a lot of that kind of rehab focus is also in Thyroid Strong.
Awesome. Sorry, my dogs are going completely bonkers for some reason. One second, I'm just going to copy a link here for everybody. Yeah, so just to tie it into mold a little bit more, when I had a practitioner when I was really sick, she talked about exercise for the mitochondrial health and how kind of stressing the body, so to speak, helps like repair damaged cells and stimulates mitochondria. Plus, it just gets oxygen to your tissues when you exercise, which is usually an issue with mold. The blood is kind of sticky, and you know, you can have low red blood cells because of mold. So when she was proposing to work out more, I was really tired. Like, yeah, no. But you know, I listened, and I was just working out in the gym a little bit, like not much at first. But then I found this reformer Pilates studio, and I got really into that for a while. I like it because it's a lot of resistance and stuff, but you know, I never get injured there. I always like do really well. That might not be a fit for everyone, but it worked great for me. And then when I moved again, I got back into the gym, just kind of doing weights on circuits and stuff, like nothing crazy, but it definitely helped get my energy back. It's kind of counterintuitive. Like you think, oh, it's just going to wear you out. But if you don't do, you know, if you push it, but not excessive, because you shouldn't be, in my opinion, like taking 3 days to recover, or you can't sleep at night, which can happen with thyroid people too. Just finding that balance. And I was surprised how quickly I was able to do more and more. I think it's a good part of recovery. And like there's some factual stuff too about how it's actually going to help you, you know, detox and rebuild your cellular energy or help your thyroid perform better. So I really wanted people to know, like, this is an actual like detox strategy, healing strategy, right? It's not something you just do to like look good in a bathing suit or whatever.
Yeah. So I think a lot of women assume if they're going to the gym, it has to be like an hour or an hour and a half, like this really long extended time. And especially with mold exposure, like your energy wipes out so quickly. So might as well make it efficient. So for me, it's like 20, 30 minutes is ideal, you know, and oftentimes with mold exposure, as you know, the detox pathways feel clogged. So it's nice to get a sweat in, but not be sweating so much that you're pushing yourself to just this extreme fatigue.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Shorter workout is allowed. I rejoined the gym again in November, December, and it was so fun that I want to just go for an hour, and really do everything. And
Yeah.
I was feeling it, So now I really like have to tell myself, okay, you're gonna go for half an hour, like pick which things you want because that's all you get. And I go a little less with the weight. And it works great. And I talked with Deborah, like people constantly ask me like, what do you do to work out and stuff? Because just the combination of things, like I look super fit and ripped, and I'm like, I don't really do that much. You don't really actually have to do as much as you think. I think sometimes
Yeah.
do it
Yeah.
correctly and efficiently, like you said.
Yeah. I think especially if you're doing heavier weight, you could probably do 20, 30 minutes, 3, maybe 4 days a week if you really need to. But, the women who, for example, like have a bodybuilding focus, right? They have a bulking phase where they're eating more food, taking in more calories, and bulking up on muscle. And then they have a cutting phase where they're eating less calories and they're trying to lose the fat to get the definition. And so, sometimes we see those people on social media, and just knowing that what they're doing is cyclical. It's not like every single day 24/7. I think is important to know. And I think I have a lot of friends who are trainers. They work out 4 days a week, they lift heavy, and they probably go 30 minutes. Sometimes they'll push it to 40 minutes. They don't have autoimmune conditions, so I think changing that timing is important if you have an autoimmune condition. But yeah, I think this assumption of like 6 days a week, hour,
Right.
is
Right. There's so many assumptions in exercise, and it's not my specialty as much as yours, but as I'm learning more about it, I'm like, huh, there's so much here.
totally.
We think we know, just like diet. Oh, we think we know how the best
Yeah.
to eat, but you really haven't actually studied it
Yeah.
from experts or from like kind of evolutionary perspective, functional perspective, any of that. So super interesting. Yeah, we'll have to have you back on to talk more about like posture at home, working at home. I know that's another one of your specialties, but I think we kind of have a good ending point now to just get people thinking about exercise a little differently. You've got a program called Thyroid Strong, it's an online program, right? We're teaching people kind of everything we talked about today. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Just with all the cueing and I give options, like if it's a kettlebell based program, but if they don't have kettlebells, it could be something else like dumbbells. I've had women use sandbags, a bag of books, like,
Awesome. Let me
yeah.
make sure I'll get that in the Facebook chat, and then we'll have it on the YouTube as well. And then you've got a free download of some sort. You want to talk about that?
Yep. There's a couple. There's one on fatigue, and then there's one on 3 things not to do in your workout and what to do instead. Yeah, and there's also, in the course, there's posture tips. So when I was in New York for 13 years, we did a lot of corporate wellness and a lot of ergonomic assessments, one-on-one, and yep. And, posture, talk, lunch, and learn. So there's a lot of that content that I did in New York.
Okay.
In the course. Yeah, because I think
Go ahead.
it's important to optimize outside of just during our exercise, right? Because we don't like exercise and work out to get better at working out. We do it to get better at life, to like feel better, have more energy, and an aesthetic change is always icing on the cake. But I think the biggest thing is a lot of women think we need to get motivated, like let's get motivated to work out. I do not know many women who get motivated when they look at a weight. I think momentum over motivation. So just like little by little, every single week, one step in front of the other is important to focus on, especially if someone feels like they fell off the workout train or they feel really deconditioned.
Yeah, it's easy to, when you fall off that train with chronic illness, it kind of feels like, doesn't even seem to like make sense to get back on it. You're like, well, I'm sick. Why would I be doing all this? But I think it's so important. And there's just so many benefits to exercise for your mood and your blood sugar and just a million things. So yeah, I think it's great to get back on it. Yeah, I love to exercise. Like, it's just a stress reliever for me, and since I have a very mental job. But I've been realizing I'm pretty bad about like paying attention to my body when I work, and it's like something I'm really trying to bring back in, because that's so many hours of the day. And if you're just like checking out of how your body feels and where it is in space, yeah, I was super guilty of that one. And I think it's really important. It kind of relates to a lot of chronic pain that is tied in to these other issues, hypermobility or chronic inflammation from mold. So, you're not doing yourself any favors to have poor postural habits and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Emily. Really appreciate your time. I'm glad you're just doing better and better. And we'll have to have you back on to keep us strong and healthy. Bye, everybody.